So Dena, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chris, and thanks to all of you for letting me take this slot to present. I will be physically on your campus next week. We're on your campuses, I guess, next week. So, if anyone isn't already, set up to talk with me and wants to, please just get in touch and we will figure something out. So as Chris said, the focus of my bioethics writing has changed, and you probably won't be surprised to know that that's because my mother, who died at age 99, had Alzheimer's for 10 years before she died. It was a nightmare situation that she would have absolutely hated, and there seemed to be no way out of it. So it changed some of my interest and some of my focus. And I have been writing pretty steadily for the last 2-3 years, more, I guess, saying, look, at least in the US, there is absolutely nothing that is going to help you to avoid spending your, up to 10 years or even more in a state that you would absolutely not want to be in. And therefore arguing that some form of suicide, not at all the kind of suicide that my society is willing to support, is the only way. Basically trying to figure out how to use the new science of biomarkers and early diagnostics to keep an eye on your own situation and to get out while the getting's good, as we say in the States. But there are a lot of people who believe that we really, are addressing this problem, that there are strategies, or they're arguing for strategies. And I think all of that is really nonsense. I think it's irrelevant. And I think it's important that we face that fact. And the reason I think it's irrelevant is that almost everything that people talk about targets the final stage of Alzheimer's, when a person is pretty much immobile, unable to eat by themselves, very non-communicative, the final stage of what can be a very, very long process. And I have been claiming that for most people, that doesn't answer their concerns, that most people would want to have their lives end significantly before that. But I had no data to back that up, only anecdote. So this presents the data that we have found. So here are some of the end-of-life strategies in the US. As you probably know, euthanasia is a totally taboo term in the US, can't even talk about it. We do have physician-assisted suicide in about 1/3 of the country, but it's irrelevant with respect to Alzheimer's or any dementia because it requires that the person be competent. There's some discussion about the efficacy of voluntarily stopping eating and drinking, but that tends to be focused on people who have lost interest in food. So it's about writing an advance directive saying, please don't try to artfully hand feed me and coax that little tablespoon of applesauce into me when I'm no longer interested. So that also is focused on pretty much the final stages of life. Then there are some people who have come up with various advance directives for dementia, but in my estimation, they're problematic for 2 reasons. So first, if they allow the person to choose comfort care only in a situation of early dementia, I believe they will probably not be followed, in large part due to the moral distress of the healthcare providers. That's another story for another time. The second is that if these advance directives focus on the final stage of dementia, when they are more likely to be followed, then they are irrelevant to what most people want. And that is the focus of today's discussion. So our question was, are most Americans content to avoid the final stage or stages of dementia, or would they rather that their lives end earlier? And we did 2 surveys simultaneously. Each of them had 524 respondents, and they were all American. They were all over age 50. We asked a few questions, not a lot. I now kind of regret that we didn't ask some more. But we asked gender and level of education, and we wanted to know if they had had a close friend or family member with dementia. So the first survey told stories about 4 people, all of whom have Alzheimer's disease. And all 4 people die of fatal heart attacks at different stages of their life with Alzheimer's. And we asked the respondents to read the 4 stories and choose the person whose story most resembles how they would want their life to go if they had Alzheimer's. So would you consider yourself better off if you had a heart attack early, or if you lived the longest life possible? And here are some highlights of the results. I was kind of surprised at this. I've asked this question pretty much every time I give a talk, not today because we don't have much time, but I usually start talks by asking people to raise their hands or whatever. But even so, I was a little surprised. 56% of Americans over 50 would prefer to have had a heart attack at the earliest stage when they were diagnosed with Alzheimer's, but still able to live independently and with only minor memory loss. 20% chose the second stage, where they're still living at home, but unable to drive and exhibiting increasing erratic behavior. So that's 3/4 if you add those 2 together. 3/4 of the people would prefer that their lives end before they are unable to live independently or unable to live at home, for example. 11% chose the third stage, when the protagonist was incontinent and living in what we call the NICE memory care center. We said she no longer recognizes her family, but she seems to enjoy their frequent visits. So we wanted to make this somebody who is, substantially demented, but not clearly suffering or having an unhappy life. And finally, 12.5% of people preferred to have a heart attack while in the final stage, which we described as follows. So she had been moved to the dementia unit of a nursing home, not able to speak, walk, or eat on her own, in a bed, in a wheelchair. She appears to be comfortable, though, and responds with a smile to food she likes or music she recognizes. So then we did a second survey with a different set of respondents. And by the way, it took us many, many months, and I'm still not sure we got it right. Subjunctives are tricky. I once tried to do this in French and I gave up. I just couldn't deal with the if, almost, would she, could she, if she had, then what would she? I mean, it was really, really hard. And even in English, when you don't have the person in the room and you're just trying to write it, and you have to write it exactly right because it's the only chance you're going to get with this respondent, it was very difficult with people who maybe had never thought about this to talk about the if, then, what if, could she, would she problem. So anyway, this is what we came up with. So we said the following story is about Mrs. W. She's 75. She's in the first stage of Alzheimer's disease. She's trying to look ahead and give her family directions about her future care, should she no longer be competent to make her own decisions. She imagines that at some stage in her life she gets pneumonia, and she or her family must decide whether or not to treat it. If she doesn't take antibiotics, she will almost certainly die. If she does take antibiotics, she will almost certainly live for about another 10 years. So we were trying to close off the possibility that people would worry about, oh, maybe I don't take antibiotics, but I live anyway, and I'm just in a worse state. We were trying to make it a little more black and white. Then we say, right now, Mrs. W can choose, but in the future, she might not be able to choose. In the following questions, please imagine that you are Mrs. W. At each stage, you will be asked what decision you would make about antibiotics if you were her. So here are some of the highlights from the answers. 20% would refuse antibiotics in the very first stage. And this was the only place that we have seen a significant gender difference. And here it was significantly more men refusing antibiotics at stage 1. 35 would refuse at stage 2. So that's getting close to 50-50. At stage 3, the balance shifts with 57% refusing. And at stage 4, 71% of the participants would refuse antibiotics. So I am sorry, I realize I probably should have done a comparison slide, and I didn't. But to go back, you'll see that at the earliest stage in the heart attack story, 56% would prefer to die of a heart attack at the earliest stage. But in the antibiotic story, at that same stage, only 20% would refuse antibiotics, and so on. So we thought that was particularly interesting. So here's some of the things that we want to think about. And this is very much a work in progress. So we haven't yet started to look at the comments in a systematic way. We gave each person the possibility, but did not require that they write comments. And now this very interesting question: why are so many more people choosing the heart attack scenario in stage 1, but at that same stage, only 20% would refuse the antibiotic? I mean, the result is the same, right? What is this huge difference? So one possibility is that maybe people don't want to be responsible for causing their death by refusing an antibiotic that is otherwise available to them, whereas the heart attack is described as something that simply happens to you like a bolt of lightning, and you don't have to feel like you're responsible for it. But maybe there are other explanations. Maybe they fear that dying of pneumonia would be unpleasant. Maybe we should have used pneumonia in both surveys. This is something we need. I mean, it was so striking that we really need to think about how to interrogate that better. But even in the second survey, 20% of people would refuse an antibiotic in stage 1. In my view, that's a substantial percentage in terms of policy, that a policy that assumes that people are, willing to live a life with Alzheimer's, at least in the first stage, is true for 80% of people in the survey, but 20%, in my opinion, is still a lot of people. Maybe I think that because I'm in that 20%. But considering what's at stake here, I think those 20% of people deserve respect. Something we haven't done yet, but we are capable of doing, is we need to correlate our responses with whether or not respondents had a family member of family member or a close friend with dementia. Does that make a difference? And our tentative conclusion is that advanced directives that only deal with the final stage of dementia do not meet the concerns of the majority of Americans over age 50, which I think is important since most of my American colleagues seem unconcerned about this, or they are working on various kinds of strategies that completely ignore what most people are concerned about. So thank you very much. And I hope I left time for questions and feedback, which I'm really hoping for.
Sure. Thank you, Dena, for this presentation. And yes, we have time for discussion and questions. So the floor is open to everyone who would like to ask a question.
I see a raised hand. Zoe has a hand up?
Yeah, Zoe, yeah.
Maybe not.
Zoe Klaassen, do you want to ask a question?
Oh yeah, sorry, my mic was muted. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, yes, yeah.
Okay, so thank you so much for such an interesting talk, and indeed the numbers are really interesting and striking. And I was actually wondering, in contrasting both of the scenarios, that, the pneumonia case, it seems like it's more of a social event, like refusing treatment. It seems also that family might be involved, so maybe there's something to think about there, that it's a more social event and that there might be family pressure, or that people might not refuse the medication because they might not think that their family agrees with that decision, or
No, thank you. That's super useful. Or they might worry that family members might feel later kind of guilty that they didn't pressure them into taking it or whatever. Right. The minute you make a choice, the minute you lay out a choice, then there are all kinds of issues that, if you just get hit by a heart attack and you're dead, those issues disappear. So thank you, Zoe. That's really helpful.
Yeah, super interesting research. Yeah.
And there is another question of Jared Hoos.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you so much for the presentation. I think it's very fascinating. My question is, in addition to asking about whether the respondent had someone they knew who had dementia or Alzheimer's, did you also look at whether they worked with persons with dementia? Because I'd be very curious to see if there's a difference between someone who's more they've had relations with someone with dementia versus someone who in their daily life works with someone with dementia. So is that something that you looked at?
No, we didn't, but it's something to add to the list if we do this or something like it again, because I think you're absolutely right it would be really interesting to see the difference between having a family member die of it and dealing with it in your daily work life. Another thing that I really wish we'd asked, and I don't really know why we didn't, we were trying not to burden people and tire them and so on, but I wish we'd asked about religion, which is more of an issue here in the States than it is for certainly in Belgium and the Netherlands.
Okay. There is room for another question. Is there someone who would like to intervene?
It doesn't have to be a question, it can just be feedback.
Or feedback or discussion point. No. Yes, Bernadette Dirkse-Kasterlee.
Yes, Dena, thank you so much for this presentation with very interesting results. I was just curious, you told that there were some comments that you still have to analyze. Did the participants have the opportunity to explain their positions, or just an open question at the end of the survey with the possibility to give some comments?
Yes, thank you, Bernadette. It was the latter. There was a kind of a box for comments, but the comments were not directed. So part of what we're trying to do is, kind of try and figure out, okay, how do we take this comment and tie it to this person's answers so we understand their answers better? But that may be a lost cause. And some people just sort of commented, they'll say, my brother went through this and I wouldn't want to go through this or something like that.
Okay.
And every once in a while you get a comment which suggests that you probably ought to throw out the answer because they didn't understand it or something.
Yeah, okay. Because your results really show the need for more qualitative research in this field. Do you have the possibility to contact again or it's just no?
No, we do not have the possibility to contact them, but we do. My sense is it took. So I'm not a social scientist. Thank goodness I had Lauren Denley as my partner, because she is. But it took us a long time to get this show on the road, almost a year. But I think it would take very little time to do another survey using the same survey company and that's all. And I think we've kind of got it under our belt. And fortunately, we do have the money. So I think that, now that we see what questions we should have asked and didn't, or now that we want to probe more, that we have information, like, wow, what is this difference between heart attack and antibiotics that is so dramatic? I don't think it would be hard to do one or more surveys. And as long as the survey population is pretty large, like 500, I don't think it matters that much that it's not going to be the same people. But if we started identifying these people, the IRB would be giving us a much harder time, as they should.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Is there someone who wants to intervene with another remark, feedback on Dena's research?
Can I ask? Oh, somebody?
Yeah, I also have a question. So I was wondering if you would have looked to other research in other countries, for instance, the Netherlands. I don't know by head if there is similar research in other countries so that you can compare. Are your results confirmed by other studies, or is this the first study that is focusing to this topic in this way?
That's a really great question, Chris, but I'm not. So the quick answer is no, I don't know. But the longer answer is, let's say that we wanted to do a comparable study, say in Belgium. How could it possibly be comparable? I mean, we're dealing with a situation where it can be almost taboo to suggest that one not do antibiotics. We're still there. I mean, from my perspective, we're really backward compared to you guys. One of the things that we left out of this study because we didn't want to freak people out was we didn't discuss physician-assisted suicide at all, because to a lot of people, one, that's illegal, which it still is in many parts, in the majority of the US, and it freaks them out. Suicide is a bad thing. So even if we were to do a comparable study, it wouldn't be a comparable study because the context would be, so I'm in Ghent at the moment, and I was hanging out by the canal on Saturday and wanted a cold drink like everybody else, and the cafe didn't have any empty tables. I saw a table with a woman, probably in her 50s, was a 2-person table and she was alone. I asked if I could join her. She said yes. We started a chat. She wanted to know what I was doing here. And I explained. Oh, she said, my brother is a doctor and he performs euthanasia. And I'll give you his email. I mean, I was stunned. This was so, I mean, it was kind of a cool coincidence, but the point is, sure, let's talk about this. No problem at all. And it's just a completely different situation.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
So,
Evert Kleinders, yes.
Yes, thank you for this interesting presentation. Based on the comment that you made just before, do you have any idea how big the problem of non-respondents might be? That even making suggestions and questions that you wouldn't do, well, you don't specifically ask about euthanasia, but you do, I guess, approach it in some way. You think this might have already caused some people not to answer this questionnaire who you might be interested in?
well, that is certainly possible. The company that we use, which is called Qualtrics, basically guarantees a preset number, in our case, 500 people per survey. And if people do not complete the survey, or if they complete it in a way that looks, you know, crazy, then that doesn't count as one of your people. So the good thing is you have 500 sort of guaranteed decent surveys where people have answered all the questions. The bad part is you don't know how many people were not interested in doing the survey in the first place, or, you know, who answered so crazily that the company just kicked it out.
Okay, thank
It's
you.
a good question. I wonder, you know, I wonder if we could, you know, ask them, you know, how many people did you have to, but it would be
I
hard.
think
Because sometimes people just don't have the time or something.
Yeah, I'm a statistician myself, and I do think that, or I do know that in statistics there are ways to deal with missing data. For example, in surveys where some people might answer some questions but don't answer some others. So I think, for example, the information about how many people didn't fill in a survey or refuse to fill in a survey completely could already be interesting to know how representative your sample is for the population, so to speak.
Absolutely. I'll ask them. And, you know, I do know that everyone we got was complete or we didn't get it. That was the deal. But how many people they had to ask in order to get the 1,050 they got, that I don't know. And they ought to be able to know that. So thank you. I'm going to try and ask them.
So thank you. That was also an interesting feedback, I think, regarding the statistical analysis of the data. I see it's 1 o'clock, so it's time to conclude this session. I would like to thank both Alice and Dena for their presentations and for the colleagues who intervened in the discussion. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you very much. Bye.